Hi, it's Bill Sutton.
And Jason Sutton.
Welcome to another episode of Sutton Impact Family Style. Big week this week, Jace.
Very big week. But we'll start out with a normal sports business minute.
Yeah, a couple things. I want to talk about the jersey sponsorships in the NBA. I think there's 7 teams now that have a jersey deal, and the last 2, in my opinion, are 2 of the best because they make a lot of sense. Disney and the Magic have become jersey partners. And, I don't know how much Disney needs promoted, but it's a great association with Orlando and it makes a lot of sense. But the one I'm really wild about is the Fitbit deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, Fitbit, is getting a lot of competition from Apple Watch and a lot of other places, but Fitbit is in a position now to really do something dramatic and impact a lot of things in easy activation. I know one of the first things they did is they gave every Timberwolf employee a Fitbit, and they're going to have these competitions, these fitness competitions and everything else. And I can see that happening in the market, doing it different places. But, I've also, how my mind works, the Jack Link's commercial with Karl Anthony Towns and Sasquatch, I can see them doing that, and then they both look at their wrist to look at their Fitbit while they're working out. I can see that happening too. So that was a lot of fun. And I think you'll probably see a couple more NBA deals come on the heels of that. But those 2 were really logical to me. And then the other thing that got a lot of attention is that the Golden State Warriors' new arena in downtown San Francisco, it's the first arena in downtown San Francisco in over 80 years. So it's going to attract a lot of attention. But the suites are going to range from $1.5 to $2.5 million a year.
Wow.
And, we always talk about San Francisco being crazy expensive. And here's just another thing that goes with it. I mean, there's a lot of disposable income in San Francisco and a lot of demand for the Warriors. And so those are going to be the highest price suites that I know of. But, I think that with the new football stadium in LA, you'll see some high price suites on a football thing, but you don't have the number of events that you're going to have in that building in San Francisco, which are probably 200 plus events a year. And people forget that sometimes it's the other things that attract people to buy a suite,
right?
Like the artists, the concerts that'll come, and that'll happen. So I look at that one, and related to that, I've been reading about an IRS ruling that lets you take a personal seat license, a PSL, and view it as a loan. So you don't have to count the income, but you have to pay the people back that bought the PSL. But you can do it over 30 to 50 years.
Wow.
So that's going to be interesting to see where that goes out. I know that's what the Rams are considering, and by association, the Chargers, I guess. So we'll see where it goes.
Indeed. That's fascinating. And that's why the Warriors were able to pay a record price for a second-round pick this year.
Yeah.
$3.5 million to buy a second-round pick.
Yep. And I think, going over the cap, maybe San Francisco should have a special cap.
They're going to need it. They're going to need the Yankees.
Yeah.
But again, people still love the Warriors. But a team that I've loved most of my life, who just every single day make it harder and harder to love, are the New York Knicks. Just this week, we learned that during some of the player workouts, besides Phil continuing to assist, they all learned how to play the triangle. We found out that he was falling asleep during player workouts. There's a number of players that had reported that they would look in the stands and he would be dozing off. During the draft, their owner, who unfortunately is never going away, except when they need him, during the draft, he was performing a gig with his band during the entire first round of the NBA draft. The most important night of the year for a team, and he's off playing music.
Which, let's face it, they're not the Rolling Stones.
No. And he refuses to sell the team, which means they're going to be stuck, no matter even if they get rid of Phil someday. They're never going to get rid of the Dolans. And it gives you just no hope. That and the fact that, besides the fact they were thinking about trading Porzingis, or maybe still are trying to trade Porzingis, just like they devalued Carmelo Anthony to the point they're just going to buy him out and get nothing for him. There's been all these reports leaked about all the different injuries Porzingis has had, and there's some attitude problems with Porzingis, and it's like the only place that could be coming from is inside the New York Knicks. Which again, even if you're trying to trade a player you should never try to trade because there's not anybody else like him in the NBA, who's only 21 years old. Why are you just trying to devalue?
I was really surprised Carmelo wasn't moved this week before the draft.
I think teams know that they don't have to pay for him now. Like, why give up anything for Carmelo? Phil's devalued him. He's basically said, we don't want you here. Go find somewhere else. And it sounds like he's just going to be bought out, and he'll be able to go play wherever he wants to play.
Well, with the Phil thing, I think there's something to be said for knowing when it's time to leave and knowing when it's time to go. And as great as Phil was, that's 20 years ago.
20 years ago. And that was never as a general manager.
No.
And again, a part-time general manager. He doesn't travel with the team.
No.
He's apparently falling asleep during it. I mean,
He's getting a big paycheck for not really producing anything.
Right. But in a typical Dolan move, Phil Jackson was the biggest name to go get.
Yeah.
Not the smartest basketball decision, but the most glamorous. And again, I think with some cities that would have a lot of cachet and everything else. But surprisingly, in New York, you have some pretty smart basketball fans.
Very smart basketball fans.
And I think you could have brought in a better basketball personnel person, a little more dedicated person, and they would have been even more excited.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure people got excited about the name Phil Jackson. You think 11 rings, you think Jordan, you think Kobe, Shaq, Pippen. But again, it's really depressing. It's one of the best franchises in basketball. They have amazing fans, and it seemed like when they got Porzingis 2 years ago, there was this potential turnaround. Like maybe the Knicks were going to start building towards something.
He was a lot bigger player than anybody thought he was going to be.
Right.
More of an impact.
And now you're looking at them, and they seem to be back to square one.
Yeah. Also, I want to shout out to a team that's doing the right thing, the 76ers. I'm very excited. They're one of my clients. I want to put that on the table first so everybody knows that this is not without a little bit of bias.
True.
But I am excited to be able to go and watch that team play this year because Philadelphia, to me, is one of the best basketball markets in the country, if not the best basketball market in the country. And those fans have been really supporting that team. They bought into the process. They bought into the thoughts. And now this week, they had to cap season tickets. There's so much demand. They capped season tickets at 14,500 season tickets, and they are projecting that they're going to sell out every game. Now, whether they make the playoffs this year or not, I don't. I think another improvement. I mean, but it's the East, so I can see them being a 7 or 8 in the East.
It's true. The big issue with them is that health.
Yeah.
I mean, Joel Embiid is...
Can you keep those guys on the court?
Right.
Yeah.
He's by far the best social media player in the NBA. He's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah.
And when he's on the court, he's everything that he was advertised to be.
And more.
He's phenomenal.
He's better than I thought he'd be.
But he has played 31 games since he's been drafted. Ben Simmons has played 0 games since he's been drafted. And Ben Simmons isn't going to play in Summer League this year either, which is either a good move or a bad move. But I mean, I would think a guy that just missed a year, Summer League might be a good place for him to go.
Yeah, but I think they're going to make the whole NBA exhibition season. They got plenty of time to play him.
It's true.
They want to make sure he's on the court.
And then I guess there was some talks that Fultz has some knee issues as well, which is one of the reasons people didn't necessarily fall in love with him.
We'll see.
And I guess my only other draft news, and I think we spoke about this a little bit last week, but I want to root for him because on some weird level I like his dad being in the NBA. But I see such little charisma and leadership they said he's a good leader.
I heard him say that.
But when I watch him talk and I look at him, he just seems to lack any sort of personality or charisma whatsoever. And of course that's Lonzo Ball.
And Magic pointed to the jerseys and said, hope one day there'll be a ball jersey up there in the rafters of the Staples Center.
Keeping in mind there are 3 balls.
Yes.
Of the Big Baller brand.
Yeah.
So perhaps it'll be one of the other ones. And again, I have nothing against Lonzo Ball.
No.
Like
I feel bad for him. He's got a target on his back. I mean,
got a huge target on his back. And again, I'm biased. I don't watch a lot of college basketball. And I did happen to see both times that they played Kentucky because I tend to watch the bigger games.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched him get absolutely smoked by De'Aaron Fox, who again stole the draft in my opinion.
Yeah.
He was funny. He was charming. He had the shoes, the coat,
the watch.
He just, and again, he seems like he's the kind of person you want to be around and build a team around.
Yeah. He's very charismatic.
He's very charismatic. So again, all this is whatever. It's the draft, and you never really know until the draft is over.
Yeah.
Which leads us sort of into our segment today. We've done this with basketball. We've done this with basketball, and we've done this with baseball, and now we're going to do it with football. And that is to discuss our 10 favorite players that we've seen with some of our own rules, obviously.
Yeah.
We had to have seen them play.
Live or on television.
Live or on television. So I've seen clips of Jim Brown, but I've never actually watched Jim Brown play live, so he cannot be on my list. And again, this list is also, it's very much a personal list. So I'm not going to have any New England Patriots on my list. I'm just not. I can begrudgingly admit that Tom Brady's an amazing player, maybe the greatest quarterback of all time.
But I don't enjoy watching him.
But I hate watching him.
Yeah. No.
Because he's on the Patriots and...
Yeah, I think it's not, we're not saying these are the 10 best players. These are the 10 best players that we enjoyed watching. Right. And that's the caveat. So you're not going to agree with our list, but these are players that we just have enjoyed watching or, seeing in a game or seeing on television.
Exactly. And I guess one thing you want to start?
No, go ahead.
Number 10. I'm sort of going to group 3 players into number 10, and these are players that, on some level, I should absolutely hate them.
Okay.
But they brought me so much joy. My favorite, outside of the Super Bowls I got to watch with you, my absolute favorite moments of watching football have all come during Steelers-Ravens games.
Okay.
So sort of in a conglomerate of one pick, I'm putting Ed Reed, Terrell Suggs, and Ray Lewis. Because they brought me so much hate/love. Like, first off, they're 3 amazing players. Probably 3 Hall of Fame players. And they brought the best out of the Steelers, and the Steelers brought the best out of them. Like, watching them play, Terrell Suggs has the Steelers number. He makes a huge play against them every week. Ed Reed is, arguably one of the greatest safeties of all time. And Ray Lewis, despite what you think about his off-the-field incidents, although he was found innocent, for whatever that's worth, he just... those entrances, it got me hyped.
Okay.
So they brought me a lot of weird joy watching them, I suppose. So I had to give them a little love.
Okay, I can see that. I don't have any Ravens on my list. No. Because I don't enjoy them. And I want to make sure when I enjoy it, I enjoy it.
All right.
So my number 10 is Antonio Brown. And he's only 10 because he hasn't withstood the test of time yet. But he's a great player. I enjoy watching him make plays. I don't like the twerking, but I like the fact that on any given play, he can break it and go all the way. And I enjoy watching him play. I like his energy. I like his passion. So he's my 10.
All right. So moving into number 9, one of my favorite players as a child, Greg Lloyd. Avoid Lloyd. Steelers linebacker and just general mean person. He sort of took over. The Steelers have had a long tradition of sort of attitude-y, mean linebackers. And he fit that to a T. Mm-hmm. And he had a stretch with the Steelers where he was just an absolute terror coming off the edge. And he hit people.
Yes, he did.
And I know that that's not as fun now in the NFL with all the concussions and everything else, but he just brutalized people. And they were the signs, avoid Lloyd. And he just had this mean demeanor and swagger, and he just brought all of us out. Like, he felt like he was the heart and soul of that defense. He was the attitude on the field. Besides the great plays he made, he just brought this energy and this attitude, and I had to put him on the list.
Okay. My 9 is Bobby Lane, who you would have never seen, but Bobby Lane won a couple championships for the Detroit Lions, and then he ended up with the Steelers when the Steelers were mediocre at best, but he made them better than they were. What I remember about Bobby Lane, the last player not to wear a face mask. He's a quarterback. But I remember spending a night with my friends who lived over a bar in Pittsburgh called Dante's, and that was where Bobby Lane would go every weekend to celebrate. And so I remember us staying on a Friday night and a Saturday. I think it was a Friday night that we saw Bobby Lane carried out of the bar by 4 people, just drunk on his ass. And he'd been in a bar fight and just carried him out. And that weekend, I think he threw for 3 touchdowns and 280 yards. I mean, what a competitor. And I always laugh when that Artie Donovan, that was a former NFL player for the Colts, used to be on all the talk shows, a very funny guy. He said if he is ever reincarnated, he wants to come back as Bobby Lane's cab driver. So somebody with a big liver, a big lover of life, but a real competitor and a real warrior on the field. Bobby Lane.
Nice. I'm not moving very far with my next pick. That's Joey Porter, Peasy, of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Outside linebacker. Followed Greg Lloyd. He had a terrible stint with the Dolphins at the end. We don't count that. And now he's back coaching the Steelers linebackers. Joey Porter was the kind of player that if he's on your team, you love him. If he's on the other team, you hate him. Because again, he talked the entire game. He was known for his mouth as much as his play on the field, but he also had 55 career sacks.
Yeah.
He made big plays for the Steelers. And again, there's probably a theme with a lot of my players. He had a lot of attitude. Mm-hmm. And he definitely was, again, he was the leader of the defense emotionally. You had Kevin Green on the other side. Great player, Hall of Fame player. And a perfect compliment. But Kevin Green just sort of was the lunch pail, like come to work. And Aaron Smith and those guys just kept it quiet. Where Joey Porter...
Yep. Talk about it.
Just talked the entire game. He had a lot of attitude. He got in fights before games. And again, I know that's not something to be admired necessarily, but you know, when you're younger, it's something you just like that fire, that edge. And again, now it seems like he's sort of settled down. He's coaching the Steelers linebackers. And Peasy was just, you know, when he played, he was my favorite Steeler.
All right, good one. He's on my list, but I do like him. My next player is Dick Butkus. Ferocious. It played on, again, mediocre team, great talent on a mediocre team. And I remember I saw Dick Butkus play the year the Steelers and the Bears tied for the worst record in the NFL. But the Bears beat the Steelers. And it was a coin flip. The Steelers won the toss and I think that's when they got Joe Green. It was either Joe Green or Terry Bradshaw, one of the two, with their number one pick because they're so bad. But I saw Dick Butkus, the Steelers, I saw that game, and I saw Dick Butkus chase the Steelers quarterback, Dick Shiner, across the field, and Shiner ran out of bounds, and Butkus didn't stop. He tackled him on the cinder track behind the Steeler bench. That's where he tackled him. And the next time he was chasing him, Shiner took the ball and threw it in the fourth row of the stands. I mean, that's how afraid people were of Dick Butkus. He was just real fear and ferocious.
And he had the famous haircut.
Yes.
All right. My next player is a non-Steeler, which will make people happy. Mm-hmm. And that's Brett Favre. Brett Favre was just so much... He was one of those guys that looked... I mean, I know it's the cliche that he played like backyard football. It seemed like he was like, you guys go get open, I'm going to run around, and I'm just going to fling it. And, you know, he was exactly what he said he was. He was sort of a gunslinger. He would get out there, he would run around, and he would try to throw the ball between the, you know, 4 defensive backs to try to get it in there. Because he believed he had the strong enough arm, he could get it there every single time. He would get knocked down, he would get up and smile, tap the guy in the back of the head, tell him good hit. And obviously towards the end of his career it was fun, but when he played, he just, you know, I remember after his dad died, he played that game. Mm-hmm. And he was just flinging the ball all over the field. A fearless player. And as a quarterback, he sort of had... You know, again, I think he probably drove some coaches crazy with it. As soon as he'd throw the ball, they'd be going no, and they would find the receiver, and they'd be yes.
Also on my list in the same spot.
In the same spot.
Mm-hmm. And remember we had our fantasy league team in Massachusetts?
I do.
And we always had Brett Favre. I love fantasy football so much we had Brett Favre. For just that reason. I mean, he drive me crazy, but I love watching Brett Favre. So...
He's just a tremendous football player.
I'm not going to add anything to that. You described it pretty well.
All right, so we'll move right into an easy one. And this is, you know, for the last 10 years, my fantasy football team has been named different iterations of his nickname. It's been the bus in some sort of movie. Mm-hmm. The bus, whatever it ends up being. Because Jerome Bettis was absolutely just a beast. Mm-hmm. In my office, I have that picture you gave me where Jerome Bettis in the snow barrels through Brian Urlacher for a touchdown. Just ran him right over. And Bettis is one of those guys, you watch him and you're like, how is he this good and this fast? Because he was round, to say the least.
Yes, he was. With little feet.
And he would talk about how he would get skinny when he ran through the hole. And somehow he got skinny running through the hole. And he just, you know, he had an infectious personality. You'd watch him, the bus is going, the wheels are turning. He'd get in the open field and just barrel through defensive backs. And And again, this is a weird story to remember about him, but I remember like towards the end of his career, they were saying about, they were doing they were panning around the field during practice.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about Jerome Bettis at the time. They're like, Bettis has said that he's dedicated himself to being in better shape this year. He's doing everything he possibly can. And they panned over, and there was Jerome Bettis driving on a golf cart eating an ice cream cone at practice.
Nice.
And again, he was just one of those freakish athletes. Like, I don't think you can ever look like Jerome Bettis and be a great running back. Like, the number of people that look like him that have played football are almost all offensive linemen or defensive linemen.
Yep. All right, well, my spot, I did what you did with the three Ravens players, and it's my running back spot.
Okay.
And my running back spot is, I call it Thunder and Lightning.
All right.
Thunder is the bus, who you just talked about, and my Lightning is Barry Sanders. Never enjoyed watching a running back as much as Barry Sanders. There's some Oklahoma State love there too, but he was an unbelievable pro. Unbelievable. Played on some, again, not great teams. He really carried that team, but he was unbelievable. I loved watching him play, and I really respected him for doing the Jim Brown thing and getting out at the top of his game. Well, he could have continued to play, but he just says enough's enough. But great running back. So my Thunder and Lightning. Imagine that backfield.
And I remember he's one of the first players I remember watching that was like, he's like a video game.
Yes.
Like, you shouldn't be able to do what he's doing on a field. The way he could stop, and then all of a sudden he's at top speed seconds later, which was just insane.
I know.
And I just, again, you wonder, like, if he'd ever got to a good team, or, the big debate is obviously if he had that Dallas Cowboys offensive line, where if he didn't have to juke through 3 or 4 guys to get to the line of scrimmage, if instead he got that 5-yard head start, like, what would happen? We'll never know, obviously, but just, like you said, incredible player to watch. My next player on this list is probably one you probably don't like.
Okay.
And that is from the U, Michael Irvin, the playmaker.
You're right. I don't like him.
I just, I've always preferred, sort of the big-bodied receiver, sort of the physical receiver as opposed to the skinny, fast guy.
And the brash, trash-talking receiver.
And the brass, trash-talking receivers. But he put up. As much as he talked, he backed it up every single time. He was part of that big 3 in Dallas that won those 3 Super Bowls. And he was, I thought during his time, no offense to any of the people that, obviously, people pretty much across the board have said Jerry Rice is the greatest receiver of all time. I thought Michael Irvin was better when they during that stretch. I thought he was a better receiver. He had less, it wasn't about the system or the quarterback. He was just a big monster that could just take over games. And again, like you said, I do like the brashness. I do like the fact that he got up and let you know what he did. Because again, he didn't do it in games where they were losing. He did it when they were winning, and they won 3 Super Bowls, and they were a dominant team.
They were.
And again, there was the whole, hookers and cocaine incidents and all that sort of stuff that I don't approve of. But on the field, I just thought it was fun to watch.
Okay. And I'll stay in the theme of brash talkers. And my next one is Joe Namath.
Huh.
I always loved Joe Namath. Another very Brett Favre-like a gunslinger with a great arm, but terrible knees. Just got beat up beyond belief. But when he won that Super Bowl and then all the stuff he did off the field, get that Sports Illustrated poster in there.
It is right there in the office.
It's right here in the office along with my Alabama Joe Willie Namath helmet.
And Broadway Joe Namath football.
Broadway Joe Namath football and Joe Namath jersey in the other room.
Yes.
And my favorite Joe Namath story, though, comes when I was working at the NBA and they were doing the sports memorabilia show. And if you're one of the first 100 people to meet to buy this Joe Namath Sports Illustrated Broadway Joe poster, that he would lithograph, he would sign it, and you could meet him. So your mother and I went, and we're talking to Joe for a minute and a half, or I'm talking to Joe, and Joe's trying to include your mother in the conversation, and he asks her a question, and here's your mother says, "You have the most eyes." The most beautiful eyes, but all she said was, "You have the most eyes." And I just thought, wow. But I remember when he walked in a room and there was like 500 people there, it was like a hush. I mean, that's Joe Namath. So it was in New Jersey, but it was still impressive. But Joe Namath is my guy.
Very nice. I know I have a very Steelers-centric list, but it makes sense. I'm wearing a Steelers shirt as we speak. And I just love the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this particular player, in my opinion, the greatest safety of all time, Troy Polamalu. You know, the Tasmanian Devil, the Whirlwind. You know, he has long hair sticking out. Very soft-spoken. Very quiet guy.
Yeah.
Even on and off the field, very quiet. But he could hit, and he just had this, you know, insane athleticism. And he just made play after play after play. And the defense was designed that you had 10 guys that were all in their spots.
Yeah.
And Troy Polamalu was allowed to do wherever he wanted. And you would watch him, he'd be on the line of scrimmage. The quarterback would think something was coming. All of a sudden, 2 seconds later, he's breaking up the pass downfield. Or he's jumping over the line and tackling the running back in the backfield. Like he leaped over the, you know. Mm-hmm. I remember the game against the Ravens. It was a few years ago, right on the Steelers Super Bowl run. It was a close game, like every Steeler-Raven game was. Flacco went back to pass, strip sack for a touchdown. Troy Polamalu.
Yeah.
And he was just a joy to watch because he was so unique as a player. And I know he got because he got to do a lot of freelance stuff that other players couldn't do, and he didn't really work necessarily in the system. But he just made play after play after play. Mm-hmm. And you'd watch that long hair just flopping along. And again, he just had this. He had this ability to make the big play also when the big play needed to be made, which I think is a pretty rare quality. So that's why Troy Polamalu is very high on my list. And one of my just favorite, just again, very soft-spoken, but you wouldn't know it by watching him play. Please forgive the phone noise.
Yes. You know, glaring omission from my list because he's not on my list. But I love him. But I was very quarterback-centric on my list.
I noticed.
My next player is Joe Kapp, quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. If you remember, when I was in the 60s and throughout the 60s, the Steelers were probably the worst, if one of the worst, if not the worst teams in the NFL. So you really couldn't root for the Steelers. So I became a huge Viking fan. And I became a Viking fan primarily because of Joe Kapp. And he was a guy that was like he never threw a spiral, he threw a duck, but he would just win. And he was gritty and he was tough. And he was a quarterback that just whipped his team in shape. I remember when they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, we always see that clip of Hank Stram. It just killed me. I was so depressed when they lost that game. But I loved Joe Kapp, which really started my love for the Vikings.
Nice. I have my second quarterback on this list, and people will be happy to know it is not a Steeler. It's a Philadelphia Eagle. It's Randall Cunningham.
Okay.
Randall Cunningham was the first quarterback I ever saw play that game the way he played it, which was the dual threat run pass quarterback. Like I know there was Steve Young and some other guys, but they weren't anywhere near the athlete that he was. Just so fast. And the way he threw the ball, he just would fling it. Just these tight, perfect spirals all the way down the field. And part of it, I mean, I have these weird connections with video games as well. You know, the Steelers weren't very good that year in video game, and I played with the Eagles. Figured I'd stick in Pennsylvania. And he was just a dominant video game player, which I know isn't a good reason to love it. But again, it's just watching him play. Like, he just had this style that was so unique.
It's enjoyment, yeah.
It's enjoyment. I remember him, like, leaping over players. Stuff you see common all the time now, but it wasn't... He just had this sort of... It was like almost like a deer. Like, he had this incredible grace the way he played the game. And again, he threw the ball so perfect, and it just seemed effortlessly. Like, he would just, run out and just fling it.
Yep.
And it would just be these tight spirals all the way down the field.
Yeah. He's a good player.
Probably a little high on my list, in retrospect. Yeah. But still there.
Well, I think this is my, 1, 2, 3, 4. My fifth and final quarterback on my list.
5 quarterbacks.
5 quarterbacks. Fran Tarkenton, also Minnesota Viking. New York Giant, Minnesota Viking again. He was Randall Cunningham before there was Randall Cunningham. Like, he was scrambling Fran, he used to call him, and he would just run around and just make things happen. And I loved his style of play, and his little guy, 6 foot, but he was awesome. And I loved him so much that when the Steelers and the Vikings played in Super Bowl IX, I literally did not know till close to it which team I was going to root for.
Wow.
Because I was still kind of I'd been this Viking fan for so long. And just loved watching Fran Tarkenton play. Hall of Famer, great player, love him. But my last 5 quarterbacks are my 10 players.
It's a lot of quarterbacks.
I know it is.
And no Steeler quarterbacks, I have to point out.
No. No Steelers. Well, Bobby Lane.
Oh, Bobby Lane.
But primarily he was a Detroit Lions.
I was like, yeah, it was mainly a Lion quarterback. All right, my next player made what I consider to be the greatest play in football history and certainly in Super Bowl history. He's still playing today, somehow, much like Brady, defying age, and that's James Harrison. James Harrison, undrafted, bounced around between the practice squads of the Ravens and the Steelers, and then he became a Steeler. 6 feet tall, and just... If that. And, you know, I follow him on Instagram, I follow him on Facebook, and I see these videos of his just workouts, which are just insane. But on the field, he's one of those players that when the Steelers need a big play, he has a knack for making the big play at the big time, at the right time. I mean, back to the play I referenced before, his 100-yard touchdown return against the Cardinals. Mm-hmm. The Steelers had a 3-point lead. Cardinals had the ball, 1st and goal. They were about to take the lead, go in the second half. And at that point in the game, I was nervous because the Steelers had come out in the beginning, but the Cardinals had clearly captured that game.
Yes.
They were shutting down the Steelers on offense, and their offense was finally clicking. They were moving the ball. Harrison snuck up to the line, looked like he was going to rush, drop back, because they're going to throw a short slant. He read the play the entire way, and then he just rumbled and stumbled 100 yards down the field, flipped into the end zone, and that was the biggest play in I think, like I said, I mean, that was a 14-point swing.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the greatest plays in Super Bowl history, if not the.
And again, it was, I mean, you know, when the coach has said he freelanced. Like he was, you know, he has, you know, as a Steeler player, he has, you know, he can choose to rush or drop back. And he faked the rush. Warner read it as he was rushing, and they dropped back and just took it off. And then there were countless plays where, again, the other team's got momentum. They're moving the ball down the field, and the Steelers just need to stop. And Harrison would come up with a sack. He'd strip the ball. He just had a knack just for making that play. And again, he's got a lot of attitude, more towards authority figures than anything else, especially Roger Goodell. Mm-hmm. But just an absolute menace on the field. I mean, again, he has that, you know, when you think about Steeler football, that physical, tough linebacker, like that's what he is.
Okay. My next pick is also a Steeler linebacker, and it's Jack Lambert. Uh-huh. I love Jack Ham, but Jack Lambert was the guy that when he came to the Steelers, they already had Joe Green, so he had a little bit of an attitude. When Jack Lambert came, he was the one that really changed the attitude and really was unbelievable. He weighed 210 pounds as a middle linebacker and always moving and always going on. I forget, I think my favorite thing I've ever seen him do, it was after a missed field goal. And Roy Jarrell had missed a field goal, and it was in a Super Bowl, and Charlie Waters, or whoever it was for the Cowboys, I think it was Charlie Waters, it was the other defensive back, came up and was making fun of Jarrell, and Lambert took him and threw him on the ground, started pointing at him, talking to him. And just Lambert he could take that whole team and just put on his shoulders and just make it happen. But he very Dick Butkus-like, but not as physically big, but had great speed and great pursuit, could cover players down the field, but he was the heart and soul of the Steelers.
And I remember as a kid, you got me that shirt. It was Jack Lambert without his helmet on. It was a cartoon Jack Lambert. He had he was hunched over, and he had a smile with all his missing teeth, like he had in real life.
Scary player.
And again, I don't remember watching him in person, but I remember watching, highlights, because I watched, NFL Network, watch Steeler highlights, and
he's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Now, are we down to our final player?
I think it's the same one.
I think it might be the same one. Surprise, surprise, it is a Pittsburgh Steeler. And it's not a linebacker or a defensive player. It's Hines Ward.
It's the same player.
The same player. I have 2 jerseys that I wear on Sundays when I come over to watch football. They're both Hines Ward jerseys. Hines Ward, I still feel like he's one of the most underrated wide receivers and players in NFL history.
No question.
Like, I feel like he'll eventually get his due in the Hall of Fame, but he never got to have the same, because the offense the Steelers played, which was run, pass, run.
Yeah.
And he was equally effective. He was as they said, the best blocking wide receiver in Steeler history, in football history maybe. He loved to hit people. He played offense like a defensive player. Like, he didn't shy away from contact.
Not at all.
Loved to hit people. And despite he was a quarterback in college, running back in college, receiver in college. And he got to the Steelers, and again, he wasn't supposed to be, an all-time great Steeler.
No. In fact, he had times when he was benched and didn't play much. He worked his way back. They'd say we're not going to start the year. He's not going to play much, and then 4 games into the season, he's a starter.
Yeah, and he was that guy on third and 6, 3rd and 7. You need the first down, you go to Hines Ward because he's going to get it. As we talked about a little bit before the show, because we tried to keep most of our players secret, but I mean this one was obviously going to be on both of our lists. But every time he got hit, he'd get up, just a giant smile on his face.
Yeah.
And I know it drove other teams nuts, but he just played with just this huge smile. And again, he played it physical. He played it. If you're from Pittsburgh has, despite the fact that, it's no longer technically a steel mill town by any stretch, but they have a very blue-collar, tough sort of attitude, which is why they've always tended to love the defensive players more than the offensive players, reflected by our list. But Hines Ward could have played. You feel like he could have been on the defense with the attitude that he played. And I remember a couple plays because people would always, dog him that he wasn't the best athlete, despite the fact that he played all his positions in college. Mm-hmm. But D'Angelo Hall was supposedly one of the fastest players in the NFL. Hines Ward caught a pass, his shoe fell off, and he outran him to the end zone.
Yep.
Like, he might not have timed fast, but he played fast.
I'll never forget the cover of Sports Illustrated after the Super Bowl where he caught the pass from Randall.
Mm-hmm.
And his arms are up, and he's off the ground. You can see his face.
Smiling.
I love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love Hines Ward.
Just a little bulldog of a player. Always made the great play.
Yeah. So that's our list. No apologies.
No.
We said at one of the very first shows that we were not going to be Pittsburgh apologists. We love Pittsburgh. We love Pittsburgh teams. And just these are the players that have caused us enjoyment. And we really enjoyed watching them play. And so I'm sure many of you have a list. I'm sure there's a lot of people in Boston with your Patriots list. And fine, have your Patriots list. Because I can't tell you, I respect Tom Brady. I don't like the Patriots. I don't like Belichick. I like nothing about it. But on that note, I do want to give a shout out to Big Papi. And the Red Sox retired Big Papi's number this week. I can't think of a player in recent time that's meant more to a city than Big Papi. So a full salute and shout out to Big Papi.
Seconded here, without a doubt. And also a shout out to Matthew Vinson, who joined the Sutton Impact Family Style family. Sutton Impact Family Style family.
Appreciate you, Matty.
And if you want to join our family as well, don't forget Sutton Impact Family Style on Patreon. If you don't want to join the family that way, please go to iTunes, subscribe, rate us. We could use the ratings. Not many people have rated us, but any ratings we can get would be greatly appreciated. It doesn't take long. Just click on as many stars as you feel like giving us.
And again, we want to take the investment in the show and make it a video show and be able to bring some guests in and do some things. So if you support us, the show will get better and better.
So until next week,
signing off. Have a great week.